Hey guys, Brett here. Today we're at TBM Brakes and we're going to install our new XS3 brake kit on this S550 Mustang. We're going to go through the full install video, including the weight measurements of the stock brakes compared to our new street brakes, and see how they do. So on the table here, we have what comes in your XS3 brake kit when you purchase it. Basically, it's going to come with 2 rotors hats, 2 discs, the hardware, mounting brackets, 2 calipers, and a folder with full detailed instructions and a packing slip for all the components that came in your brake kit for an easy install. Also available from TBM is we have vehicle-specific brake lines. Our brakes will not work with your factory brake lines, and you wouldn't want to use your factory rubber lines on this style of brake. So we have our nice stainless steel lines. They have the factory end built onto them, so it's just a direct install, no adapters or anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and assemble our rotors. I took the foam pad out of the caliper box to use that. We're going to put the rotor hat face down. Use the pad just so it doesn't scratch. It is a hard anodizing on these rotor hats and it's very durable, but I want to keep it clean, as you will too. Next, we'll take the rotor and we'll paste it onto the rotor hat, aligning the bowl holes. There'll be 2 bags of hardware kit for each rotor, 1 for each rotor. So we'll take 1 because we're doing 1 rotor. Go ahead and open it up. We're going to go ahead and install all of these 5/16 hardware into the rotor hat using red Loctite on each one of the bolts. We'll run those down and we'll torque those to the recommended 18 foot-pounds. These holes are very exact, so you want to start all the bolts by hand before you tighten any down to ensure all the holes line up. And we'll go ahead and snug the bolts down. I like to do a cross pattern as your same principle as when you're tightening a wheel. Make sure that it pulls down nice and straight. Go ahead and hand snug all the bolts. Everything feels good. And we'll move on to the torque wrench. Set at 18 foot-pounds. Generally, you can just counter hold the rotor and achieve the torque. Once you get them all torqued, just go ahead back over all of them to assure that it's seated and get the second torque reading for 18 foot-pounds. Once the rotor is torqued to the hat, it's ready to install. Now there is a left and a right rotor. The cooling vents go opposing each other, so when we get to that step, we'll just ensure that we install the rotor on the correct side of the vehicle. The hats are universal. They can go right to left, so there is not a right to left to the hat. So just put the hats on the rotor. When it comes to time to put them on the car, we'll determine which direction they go. We'll go ahead and assemble our other rotor, and we'll be ready to stick them on the car. And now we're on to step 2 and step 3 of our instructions, where we're going to have to do some clearancing on the factory knuckle to clear our new XS3 brake caliper. So now that we've clearanced our factory knuckle, I installed the bracket onto the caliper, and we're going to do a dry mock-up to assure that everything is clearing. This is a crucial step because if the bracket is contacting the stock knuckle, not allowing it to sit flat, or the caliper all the way down, your alignment of your brake pads is going to be incorrect and cause uneven pad wear, the brakes aren't going to function correctly, and you're going to have a terrible experience. So I'm going to go ahead and install this on the car without the rotor and check our clearance plots. Once it's on, you'll just want to take a flashlight and look in on the back side where you clearance to make sure that the bracket is clear, sitting flat up against the mounting points. The caliper is clear against the bolt holes on the back, and then we're ready to go. We can continue on to put on our rotor and do our final install. First thing we're going to install is our bracket without the caliper bolted to it. We're going to install Loctite on these bolts and then torque them to the recommended torque in the instruction sheet. The recommended torque on these is 60 foot-pounds. Okay, now that we have our brake bracket on and torqued, we're ready to install our rotor. At this point, we want to inspect and clean our hub. The hub surface to the hat surface is crucial to have this free and clear of any corrosion. Corrosion can set between the hub and the hat and cause it not to sit flat and give you run out in your rotor. And this is applied to any brake rotor. If we were going to put the stock brake rotor on, we would check for this same scenario to make sure that the rotor is flat against the hub and is running true. Another thing to note at this point is our brake kits are designed around factory hubs and studs. If you have an aftermarket hub or an aftermarket stud, make sure that when you put your rotor hat on that it is clear, it's sitting flat, there's nothing contacting it, making it sit crooked or not straight. If you have any troubles in that area, if you have any questions, make sure you just reach out to us on our tech support line, and Jason or one of the guys can give you a hand identifying what you have to make sure it's going to work. This one here is pretty clean. This is a Florida car with low mileage, so it doesn't have a lot of corrosion, but I'm always going to wire wheel or wire brush this just to make sure that this contact surface is nice and clean. And you can see now once it's cleaning up, the contact surface on this S550 is this outer ring and this inner ring. These actually stand up off this section, and this middle part doesn't actually contact the rotor. In your instruction sheet, there's notes here on rotor direction. You're going to look at the cooling vanes and go ahead and line them up to match to the sheet. They're going to rotate forward on the car. So this is the passenger side rotor. At this point, we're going to go ahead and install our brake rotor. Going to use some spacers and the factory lug nuts to hold the rotor flat for the caliper installation and shim check. As you can see, there's multiple holes in the rotor hat, as these rotor hats are drilled for different applications, but only one of the hole selections will work for your vehicle, so you can't put it on wrong. If it fits, it's in the correct spot. As you can see here, the brake caliper is bolted up to the bracket, the brake pads are slid into place and pushed all the way back up against the pistons. On the outside brake pad, we have a larger air gap than we do on the inside brake pad. In your hardware kit supplied are 10,000 shims and 30,000 shim. At this point, I'm going to remove the brake caliper, install a 10,000 shim between the brake caliper and the brake caliper bracket, and recheck this air gap. Okay, so now I removed the caliper again, and we're going to go ahead and install our 10,000 shim. The shim is going to go between the brake caliper and the mounting point to shift the brake caliper over so our brake pads become centered. This part can be a little tricky as the shims may want to fall out. What I'm going to do is go ahead and slide them over my two bolts and then come on the caliper and try to get them started. You'll just have to work through this. Make sure after you get them on, the bolts in and tight, you just assure that the shims didn't fall out, or only that you have one in and the other not in, and then you'll be good to go. So now that we've installed our 10,000 shim behind the brake caliper, you can see that our pad spacing is equal on both sides, and then we'll go ahead and finish the install by torquing the caliper bolts and installing our pad retaining clip. Brake caliper bolts are torqued to 37 foot-pounds. Now that we have our brakes installed on both sides, we're going to install our TBM vehicle-specific stainless steel brake line. So we're going to remove the stock brake line and install this brake line. The caliper comes with a cap over the fitting that you're going to screw this onto, so you're going to remove that cap to install this brake line. We also have available universal brake line mounts. In this case, on this S550, this universal mount works out very well in the stock location of the stock brake line mount. We just had to open this hole up a little bit for the bolt size on this car. We're going to go ahead and put it on now. Okay, so now we're to the fun part. We're gonna weigh both brake systems. So this is our XS3 brake system, and then this is the factory brake system. We just removed the car. We're excited to see the results with you. We actually haven't weighed them yet separately, side by side. So here we go. We're gonna go ahead and install all the parts, the hardware that's included, basically everything that needs to put the brake on the car. Rotor by itself is 10.5 pounds. Go and put it on our bracket with the hardware. And our brake caliper that is loaded with the brake pads and the retaining clip comes in at 16.3 pounds. I think we're going to be considerably lighter than this. I picked that rotor up and I think it's close to 30 by itself. So we'll go ahead and take this off, put on this factory S550 brake. Rotor alone is 28.6. So the rotor alone weighs more than the complete setup from TBM. Go ahead and install the hardware, the backing plate that's not used any longer, and then the stock caliper loaded with the pads, retaining clips, and hardware, same as we did here, came in at a total of 45.35 pounds. So it's pretty large. 29.1 pounds weight savings per side. 58.2 pounds total front brake weight savings going from the stock S550 brake to the XS3 street brake. Okay, so we finished bleeding our brakes and we got our front brake kit all installed on this S550 Mustang, and we're gonna take it out and do our brake pad bed-in procedure. The break-in procedure is in the instruction sheet, and it's important to do that with every new set of brakes to ensure the proper stopping power and life of your braking system. We're excited to go drive this car and see how these brakes feel.